Look at these hands. 35 years gripping a steering wheel through the winter slush of Ohio and the industrial grease of Gary, Indiana. They're cracked, they're calloused, and right now they're shaking as I try to peel the plastic off a lukewarm bag of Puso, hanging rice. It's 2 in the morning in Mandaue City. The air is so thick with humidity you don't breathe it, you swallow it. I'm sitting on a plastic chair in a $12 a night boarding house that smells like damp concrete and old cooking oil. The alley outside is flooded with waist-deep water, and I don't even have the energy to swat the mosquitoes away anymore. I wasn't always this man. 16 months ago, I was Sir Robert. I had a 2018 Peterbilt truck that was my pride and joy, and a 401k that represented every mile of highway I ever conquered. When I stepped off that plane in Cebu, I had $185,000 in liquid cash. I thought I was buying my salvation. I thought I was finally moving to a place where a man's hard work actually meant something, where a dollar could buy the kind of peace and traditional loyalty they don't sell in America anymore. I just checked my Wells Fargo app. Take a good look at this screen. $34.12. That's all that's left of 35 years of labor. Don't look at me with pity. I don't want it, and God knows I don't deserve it. I didn't get mugged in a dark alley. No one held a gun to my head and demanded my life savings. I gave it all away. I handed it over, piece by piece, to people who looked me in the eye, knelt to take my bags, and called me the most important man in the world. They smiled at me every single day while they systematically bled me until my heart stopped pumping green. You're probably watching this from a cubicle or a cold living room, looking at plane tickets and thinking you found the ultimate loophole to a happy retirement. You think you're too smart to be the dumb foreigner. You think your girl is different because she washes her clothes in a river and prays every Sunday. Well, sit down and listen to me, because I'm the ghost of your future if you don't wake up. I didn't just lose my money. I bought a front row seat to my own funeral, and the people I loved were the ones who dug the hole. To understand how I ended up here in this humidity-soaked purgatory, you have to understand the gray world I left behind. Picture Gary, Indiana, in February. The sky isn't blue, it's the color of a dirty sidewalk, and the wind off Lake Michigan doesn't just blow, it bites through your coat like it's looking for your soul. For 35 years, that was my view through the windshield of a Peterbilt. I spent 3 decades hauling steel and industrial parts across the Rust Belt, living on lukewarm coffee and the vibration of a diesel engine that became the only heartbeat I recognized. My life was measured in logbooks and way stations. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, and funerals. I traded my knees, my lower back, and my eyesight for a 401k and the promise that one day the grinding would stop and I'd finally get to live. But the world changed while I was out on the interstate. 10 years ago, my 30-year marriage didn't just end, it detonated. In the no-fault divorce era, 30 years of loyalty was worth exactly 50% of everything I owned. I watched a judge hand over the house I'd spent 20 years paying off and half the pension I'd bled for. To my ex-wife, I wasn't Bob anymore. I was just a malfunctioning ATM. Back home, a man my age is invisible. If you aren't rich or progressive enough to keep up with the new rules, you're just a ghost in a flannel shirt. I was tired of being treated like a monster for having traditional values, and I was even more tired of the silence in my studio apartment that felt louder than a jet engine. I'd sit there at night, eating a microwave dinner over the sink, scrolling through my phone just to see a human face. That's when the expat gurus started appearing in my feed. You've seen them. The guys in Hawaiian shirts telling you that for the price of a mid-size sedan, you can live like a king in paradise. They showed me pictures of women like Cherry, Women who supposedly didn't want a career or a statement, but just a man to provide and a family to love. I was 62 years old, and in Indiana I was a Social Security check with legs. But according to these videos across the ocean, I was Sir Robert. I was a hero waiting to happen. I wasn't looking for a vacation. I was looking for a sanctuary where I mattered. I was so goddamn lonely I would have climbed into a furnace if someone told me it was warm enough to melt the ice in my chest. So, I did the unthinkable. I liquidated it all. I paid the penalties. I sold my truck, my beautiful 2018 Peterbilt, and I bought a one-way ticket to Cebu. I thought I was escaping a culture that hated me, never realizing I was walking straight into a business meeting where I was the only one who didn't know the price of admission. The transition from retired trucker to international mark didn't happen in a day. It started with the algorithm. You know how it is. You're sitting there at 2 a.m., the heater in your apartment is clanking like a dying engine, and you click on one video, then another. Suddenly, my feed was a parade of middle-aged guys in Hawaiian shirts, standing on white sand beaches with teeth too white for their age. "Retire like a king for $800 a month," they whispered. They talked about geographic arbitrage like it was a holy scripture. They told me that back in Gary, my Social Security and my Teamster's pension made me a target for the tax man and a ghost to women. But in the Philippines, I was a god. I was high value. I looked at my bank balance, $185,000 liquid after the penalties and the sale of my Peterbilt, and I did the math. At $800 a month, I could live for 20 years and never touch the principal. It wasn't just a move, it was a mathematical escape from the grave. Then I found Phil's match. That's where I saw Cherry. She was 23, living in a rural barangay in Bohol. She didn't have a curated Instagram feed or a boss babe attitude. She sent me a video of her washing clothes in a river, scrubbing a t-shirt against a flat stone while the sun hit the water. She looked up at the camera, wiped sweat from her forehead, and gave a smile so shy, so seemingly pure, that it made my chest ache. She didn't ask for a Gucci bag. She asked if I'd had dinner yet. She asked if my back hurt from work. To a man who hadn't been asked, "How are you?" without a bill attached to the question in a decade, that was the ultimate narcotic. We'd stay up late on Skype. I'd be in my flannel shirt, shivering, while she sat under a dim yellow bulb with chickens clucking in the background. She called me Sir Robert. She told me she wanted a traditional man, someone she could serve and care for. My ego, starved for 30 years, inhaled that smoke like oxygen. I convinced myself I wasn't buying a girl. I was saving a soul. I thought I was the hero of the story, the big American provider coming to lift this flower out of the mud. I was 62, and I felt like I was 21 again. I didn't see the red flags because I was using them to build a campfire to stay warm. I didn't realize that when a girl is washing clothes in a river, she isn't looking for a soulmate. She's looking for a way out of the river. And I wasn't a husband to her. I was a lottery ticket with a Gary, Indiana area code. I sold the truck, signed the papers, and boarded that flight with $185,000 in my pocket, and a hole in my head where my common sense used to be. I thought I was flying toward paradise. I didn't know I was just the main course at a feast I was paying for. The doors of the Cebu airport hissed open, and the heat hit me like a physical weight. A warm, wet blanket that smelled of diesel fumes, salt air, and sweet jasmine. It was suffocating, and yet for the first time in 30 years I felt like I could actually breathe. I stepped out of that terminal with my heart hammering against my ribs, looking for a face I'd only seen through a 5-inch screen. There she was, Cherry. She looked smaller than she did on the Skype calls, more fragile, draped in a simple yellow sundress that made her skin look like polished bronze. When our eyes met, she didn't just wave or run to hug me. She walked over, took my heavy leather carry-on from my hand, and she knelt. Right there on the dirty concrete of the arrival curb, she lowered herself and pressed my hand to her forehead in a Mono Po gesture of respect. In Gary, Indiana, I was the guy people cut off in traffic. I was the old man at the diner that the waitresses ignored unless they wanted a tip. But in that moment, under the blazing Philippine sun, I was the second coming of Douglas MacArthur. My ego, which had been starving in a cold studio apartment for years, didn't just wake up, it started to roar. We took the ferry to Bohol, and then a van deep into the green, humid heart of the island. When we pulled into her barangay, I thought there was a parade for a local politician. There was a hand-painted banner stretched between two coconut trees that read, "Welcome, Sir Robert." The entire village, maybe 200 people from toddlers to toothless grandmothers, was standing there clapping as I stepped out of the van. I was the big American, the provider, the savior. That first week was a blur of intoxicating validation. Cherry whispered in my ear that it was a matter of honor to properly greet the community elders. She didn't ask for a new phone or a gold watch. She asked if we could feed the village. I didn't even blink. I reached into my pocket and handed over $3,000. $3,000. In Indiana, that was 4 months of rent and utilities. Here, it bought a lechon feast that people would talk about for years. I sat at the head of a long wooden table, watching 3 massive pigs roasting on bamboo spits, the skin crackling and glistening with oil. There were cases of San Miguel beer piled to the ceiling, and enough rice to fill the bed of my old Peterbilt. Every man in that village came up to shake my hand, calling me sir, and every woman smiled at me with a look of pure, unadulterated gratitude. You're sitting there watching this, probably calling me a moron. You're thinking, Bob, you're buying friends. And maybe I was. But you haven't lived 35 years in the gray silence of the Rust Belt. You haven't felt the soul-crushing weight of being invisible. For $3,000, I wasn't just buying pork and beer. I was buying the feeling that my life finally had a purpose. Cherry was the perfect shadow. She spent the entire night refilling my glass, fanning the mosquitoes away, and looking at me with those wide, dark eyes like I'd just invented fire. She didn't demand a cent for herself. She just worked, served, and smiled. I looked at her, then I looked at the village I was saving, and I made the most dangerous realization a man my age can make. I decided that $185,000 was a small price to pay to finally feel like a king. I thought I was the hero of the story. I didn't realize I was just the main course at a feast that was only beginning. The honeymoon didn't end with a bang. It ended with a whisper and a series of emergencies that always seemed to cost exactly what I had in my wallet. You see, in a place where the average person earns $10 a day, a man with $185,000 isn't a person anymore. You're an infrastructure project. You're a one-man World Bank, and the interest rate is your dignity. It started with June, Cherry's younger brother. He was 20, skinny as a rail, and spent his days staring at his phone. Cherry told me he was the hope of the family, but he just needed a way to provide. She said a tricycle, one of those motorcycles with a sidecar, would change his life. $3,500. Back in Gary, that was a couple of weeks of hauling steel. I didn't even blink. I handed over the cash, thinking I was teaching a man to fish. I never saw June deliver a single bag of rice. What I saw was my gas money vibrating in his tank while he roared off to the cockfights, betting on birds with knives tied to their legs. I felt the first twitch in my gut then, but I ignored it. I wanted to be the hero who fixed things. Then came the future. That's the word they use to pick your pocket while you're smiling. Cherry started talking about our kids. Kids I was probably too old to have, but too lonely to deny. She said we needed a proper house, a legacy, something made of concrete and rebar that could stand a typhoon. $75,000 for the land. But here's the trap you think you can skip. As a foreigner, you can't own a square inch of Philippine soil. Put it in Mama's name, Robert, she whispered in the dark, her breath smelling like sweet calamansi. It's for the family. It's for our children. Mama is a woman of God. She would never hurt us. I wrote the check. $75,000 for the land, then another $45,000 for the construction. I was watching my 401k melt into cinder blocks that I didn't legally own. Every time I'd asked to see the deed, there was a delay at the municipal office or a fee the lawyer needed. I was building a castle on a foundation made of someone else's promises, and my burn rate was climbing to $5,000 a month. I was paying for cousins to mix cement and uncles to guard the site. I was the CFO of a village that had decided it was time to retire on my sweat. The real knife in the ribs, though, was the great stroke. I got the call at 3 a.m. Cherry was hysterical, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "Lolo is dying, Robert. He's in the ICU." She sent me a blurry photo of an old man in a hospital bed with tubes snaking out of his nose. The private hospital in Cebu wouldn't even look at him without a deposit. $18,000. That was a whole year of my life on the road, sleeping in truck stops and eating diesel fumes. I wired the money within the hour. I thought I was saving a grandfather. I thought I was proving I was the traditional provider she said she wanted. I found out 6 months later that Lolo had been sitting in a nipa hut 3 barangays over the whole time, eating dried fish and laughing while the family split my 18 grand to buy gold necklaces and pay off old gambling debts at the local peria. They didn't even buy him a new shirt. Pay attention to the math, because this is where you'll lose your soul. On top of the big hits, there was the slow bleed. $21,000 over 14 months in allowances. I was paying for the electricity of 12 different houses. I was paying for school fees for kids I didn't know and blood pressure medicine for aunts I'd never met. I was the only bank in town that didn't require collateral. Every time I'd try to say no, the atmosphere in the house would turn into a tomb. The smiles would vanish. The mono po gestures would stop. Cherry would suddenly have a headache that lasted for a week. They don't rob you with a gun here. They rob you with the coldness that follows when the ATM is out of order. You'll find yourself handing over $500 just to see a human smile again. It's a narcotic, and I was an addict. I was 63 years old, and I was paying $185,000 to pretend I wasn't alone. I was buying a front row seat to my own execution, and I was the one who paid for the rope. The day the music stopped wasn't an explosion. It was a cold, clinical shutdown. I sat Cherry down in that $45,000 living room, the one with the imported Italian tiles and the split-unit AC I'd paid through the nose for. I laid it out straight. "Cherry, the well is dry. That $185,000, it's gone. From here on out, we're living on the Social Security and the Teamsters check. $2,400 a month. No more village fiestas. No more bailouts for June, and no more emergency hospital visits for people who aren't even sick." I expected her to hug me. I expected that traditional loyalty I'd bought and paid for to kick in. I thought she'd tell me we'd grow vegetables and get by because we had love. Instead, she just looked at me. Her eyes didn't fill with tears. They turned into two pieces of black glass. She didn't say a word. She just stood up, walked into the bedroom, and locked the door. That was the last time she ever called me Sir Robert. Within 48 hours, the sanctuary I'd built turned into a cold, concrete prison. The cousins who used to wash my truck and call me uncle suddenly started demanding wages just for standing in my yard. The feasts stopped. My dinner went from grilled blue marlin to a bowl of cold rice left on the counter like I was a stray dog they were tired of feeding. Cherry didn't have headaches anymore, she just had absence. She was gone from sunrise to midnight, helping at the church, or visiting Lolo. The night it finally shattered, I went looking for her behind the Sari Sari store, the one I'd dropped $8,500 on so her family could have dignity. I heard laughing. Not that shy, polite giggle she gave me when I arrived, but a deep, guttural laugh of a woman who was actually enjoying herself. I walked around the corner and there she was, leaned up against a crate of San Miguel, her arms wrapped around a kid who couldn't have been a day over 25. He was the cousin she'd introduced me to 3 months ago. But cousins don't put their hands where his were. When I cleared my throat, she didn't even jump. She didn't look ashamed. She just untangled herself, adjusted her dress, and looked at me with a level of contempt that made my blood run cold. "Why are you here, Robert?" she asked. "You have no more money. You are just a loud old man now." I started shouting. I screamed about the $120,000 I'd spent on the land and the house. I told her I'd burn it all down before I let some kid live in it on my dime. That's when the front door of the main house opened and her mother walked out, the woman of God I'd given $75,000 to for the property deed. She wasn't holding a Bible. She was holding a manila folder. "This is my house, Robert," the old woman said, her voice as dry as a desert. "My name is on the land. My name is on the tax declaration. You are just a guest. And in this country, guests who cannot pay for their stay are not welcome." 2 hours later, the local police arrived. One of them was Cherry's uncle. The other was a guy I'd bought 5 buckets of beer for at the last fiesta. They didn't care about my 35 years of hauling steel or my American passport. They told me I was disturbing the peace and trespassing on private property. They gave me 15 minutes to pack a duffel bag while the cousin stood there, leaning against my $45,000 wall, smoking a cigarette I'd probably paid for. As I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots for the last time, I looked back at the porch. Cherry was sitting there, her face lit up by the glow of the iPhone 14 I'd bought her for her birthday. She didn't even look up to watch me leave. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a hero. I was just a project that had reached its completion date. The bank was empty, the contract was over, and the village was moving on to the next Sir Robert, getting off the plane with a suitcase full of dreams and a head full of nothing. So, here we are. Let's do the math together, because numbers don't have feelings and they don't tell lies. I want you to hear the sound of 35 years of my life evaporating. $75,000 for the land, $45,000 for the house. That's $120,000, the bulk of my 401k, signed over to a woman who probably started planning my eviction before the concrete was even dry. $18,000 for a fake medical emergency. $8,500 for a store that feeds the village for free while I starve. $3,500 for a tricycle that hauled Cherry's real boyfriend around. $9,000 for pigs to feed people who won't even look me in the eye today. And $21,000 in allowances, a polite word for the ransom I paid every month just to keep the smiles on their faces. Total it up, $185,000. Every mile I drove through the snow in Ohio, every hour I spent breathing diesel fumes in Gary, every birthday I missed and every joint I ruined in that Peterbilt. It's all gone. 16 months. That's how long it took for a destitute village to finish the job that the American highway started. I didn't just lose my savings. I lost the only thing I had left to show for my time on this earth. I'm sitting here in Mandow City now, in a room that feels like a humid coffin. My Social Security check hits the account once a month, and by the time I pay for this dump and the medicine for my back, I'm left with pennies. I could go back to Indiana, I guess. I could walk into a shelter in Gary and tell them I'm a veteran of the road who got played by a girl half his age. But I can't do it. I'd rather die in this heat than see the "I told you so" in the eyes of the people back home. My pride is the only thing I didn't lose, and it's the very thing that's going to keep me buried here. Don't make the mistake of thinking I was a victim. I was a volunteer. I was so goddamn arrogant that I thought my wallet could buy me a shortcut to a life I hadn't earned. I thought I was Sir Robert, the great white provider, never realizing that in a place where people survive on nothing, a man with everything is just a crop waiting to be harvested. I ignored every red flag because I was addicted to the way she looked at me. I traded my future for a 16-month lie. Listen to me, and listen good. If you're looking at those travel sites, if you're scrolling through those traditional dating apps, remember my face. Remember these hands. You think you're dating a girl? No. You're signing on to be the CFO of a village that has been poor for 300 years and has decided you're their winning lottery ticket. The love lasts exactly as long as the principal in your bank account. The moment that Wells Fargo screen hits zero, the traditional loyalty turns into a police escort to the curb. Money can be replaced. I can't get back my 63rd year. I can't get back the health I spent on that truck. The money is gone, but the time is the real theft. Don't sell your life for a smile that has a price tag attached to it. It's the most expensive thing you'll ever buy, and trust me, you can't afford the closing costs. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have $34 left and I need to figure out how to make it last until the government remembers I'm still alive. Stay in the cold, kid. At least there, the ice doesn't pretend to be warm.